there are a set of key actions you can take that dramatically increase your chances. I'm Ethan Evans. My background real quick is I was an engineer, educated as an engineer by trade. I went to Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, then to Purdue University for a master's. I was in a robotics PhD program and found that a PhD wasn't for me, and I went into industry. I spent 12 years in startups, followed by 15 years at Amazon. So I joined Amazon as a senior manager in 2005, and I made my way to vice president over the next 8 years to vice president with director in the middle. And then I spent 7 more years as a vice president. I was the first engineering manager on Prime Video. I had a team of 6. Prime Video was started with a team of 6 and now is several thousand that do Prime Video. I started the Amazon App Store with a team of about a dozen, grew it to about 800. And then I finished up my career building the gaming pillar of Prime. Today, I want to talk about how you get scope in a flat growth time, because presumably most of you who are watching are leaders and you're interested because you'd like to grow your career, but it's tough times where particularly the big tech companies are still laying off or not growing. They're top heavy. They have too many leaders and not enough growth to support the growth of those leaders. So what do you do? And there are a number, I want to first share some good news. I coach privately about 50 people. And I talk to those people, and to be clear, a couple of them have been laid off, right? Like hard times, hard things have happened. But more and more from the people I talk to in detail, I'm seeing them get new scope. And we're going to talk exactly about how they're doing it because it is the same pattern. Let's jump in. So first, straight up truth. There are no guarantees that you can ever get scope. And particularly, there's no 100% certain way anyone can tell you to gain scope during downtime. There's going to be some luck involved. But there are a set of key actions you can take that dramatically increase your chances. All right. Let's just talk about how you get scope in general. How does this happen for you anywhere? Good times, bad times, et cetera. Well, the most normal way is actually your team or your organization grows. The challenge you're working on is making more money, is reaching more customers, is got a bigger technical footprint. And because it's got more to do, you're being given new headcount. This is the normal leadership growth path. That's not happening in 23, 24. It's not. It might be a little bit, but most teams are being held flat or asked to do more with less and to be efficient. That's the request. So this normal path is closed. And by the way, if you listen to me, when I was giving my bio, part of the way I grew was like I started the Amazon App Store with a team of 15 or so. And because of demand, because of circumstances, because the app-based world blew up, and because Amazon started shipping Kindle tablets, that team grew to 800. And that was just all me riding an elevator. It's a great way to grow, but it's not the only way. So what is working right now? This bottom left box is what's working for everyone. Different flavors of reorgs. A peer leaves, your manager leaves, someone else leaves, or they're fired, or they're laid off, right? Something causes a change near you that leaves other people in other organizations unled or underled. And when that happens, what companies are doing right now is they're not backfilling those leadership roles. 2 reasons. Number one, they don't want to hire more leaders. They feel top heavy. I've heard this explicitly from people I coach at Google. They don't want to hire externally. They want to promote internally. Second, managers at higher levels are looking and saying, I have another leader I coach. She lost someone. And she said, look, I'm not going to backfill that person. I'm going to cut up his team into pieces and hand it out to others. So I'm going to take this organization. One of my leaders took a new job. I'm going to cut up the organization and hand it out to feed all my other growing leaders. So you want to make sure that you're in line when these things happen. And how do you do that? Well, the next couple slides are on that, but the short summary is you need to be trusted by your manager, viewed as capable, viewed as reliable, and you need to be trusted by your skip level, because the skip level is going to be involved in this. So we'll talk about how you do that. Now, there are 3 other ways on the right to get scope, and we will talk about those as well. Running them down briefly, you can volunteer for unstaffed work. This has trade-offs. By the way, some of these same things, if there are ICs listening, wondering if I'll address you, I'm primarily speaking to managers, but the same recipe works for individual contributors. You go find something that's not being done that you can pick up and contribute to and make it your own. And then when growth returns, you're positioned to own that new thing. Or you can come up with something that's compelling to start, even though it's hard times. Companies are still starting new initiatives, even if they're not growing their existing. Now, again, the bar is higher and it's harder. I'll tell some stories about that at the end before we go into Q&A. Finally, key tip, look around. Who else is getting scope in your organization and what are they doing? Who else is getting additional opportunity and why? So I said you have to be trusted. Trust is really consistency over time. That's a working definition of trust. If you think about how you define the word trust, we all know what it means to trust someone, but it's actually a little bit hard to say, why do we trust them? What does trust mean? In a working sense, trust is consistency over time. It's believing that you're going to do what you say, that I can rely on you to follow through. Well, key point here, it's not just doing what you say, it's also saying what you're going to do. And this is where a lot of you may fall down. I don't have time to go super deep into it, but there's a flaw I see managers fall into, and I talk about this in my larger Path to Executive class all the time. There's a flaw I see people fall into, and that flaw is working hard and hoping to be noticed. And there's some of you out there listening, I know, that you're working hard and you feel like, oh, I shouldn't have to like brag about my work or publicize my work. I'm doing good work and it's up to other people to notice it. And I feel a little dirty if I talk about my own work. Well, work hard and hope to be noticed is not a sufficient plan. Now, you don't have to be always chirping about what you do. Just make sure that you are public about what you're committing to. Then you do it. And then when you're done, you say, look, it's done. And you take credit, appropriate credit for it. You announce it. You don't have to be over the top, but you do have to do a little bit of work to let your skip know and high-level peers of your manager and peers of your skip be aware of what you're contributing, because when they get in a room and decide who to give the new prizes to, who to reallocate the organization to, this is half of it. Now, what's the other half? The other half is something I call the magic loop. And there's a link at the bottom of this. You can write it down. It's from Lenny's newsletter. Lenny Rashitsky has got the largest newsletter, we think, on Substack, about 500,000 subscribers. And Jason and I did an elaborate guest post explaining this idea of the magic loop. I'm going to take you through it quickly, verbally. And it's these 3 pictures starting on the left. So the magic loop essentially says, look, here's how you grow in any job. 5 steps. Number 1, you have to do your current job well. Well, okay, all of you probably think, yes, I do that, but have you asked? Have you talked to your manager and said, hey, am I doing a great job? And if I'm not, what are my gaps? If I am, what can I double down on? But here's the key. I'll turn it around so you understand. Many of you are managers today. When's the only time you normally don't like it? If someone comes to you and says, hey, what else could I do to help you? How could I help you? Where could I do more? And you're like, the place you get that negative reaction is where you need to tell them, well, actually, it would just help if you did what you're doing well. You're falling short here, you're falling short there. You can't grow until you're thought of as doing your current responsibilities well. It doesn't mean you've got to be the best on earth, but you have to be solid. Once you've got that, then it's a simple loop. Go ask your manager how you can help. I've talked to thousands of managers being asked, hey, what could I do to help you? What could I do to help our group? What could I step up and do or take on that would help our organization is rare. Think about it yourself if you're a manager. How often do your team members really come to you and say, look, I know it's a tough time. I know we've had some layoffs or whatever. I know you're under pressure. What could I do to help? What could I do to help our team succeed? Maybe a few of you, there's always one person who's like, my team asks me that every day, but it's very rare. Then you do what they ask. You help out. Step 4 is the critical piece. You then go back and you say, look, I would like to grow my career. I would like more scope, a bigger challenge to get to this level. What could I do that would align with my career and help you? And the psychology here is really straightforward. People help those who help them. You might say, well, that's not right. My boss should be invested in my career. Well, your manager has a lot to do. And the fact is they pay more attention. There is a natural human psychology that people who are helping us, we work to help them back. So some people would say, well, Ethan, you just said like suck up or kiss up. No, I didn't. I said, be helpful, be a contributor to your team, be an active contributor, and then ask them to contribute back to you by giving you a path to the next level. Now, speeding up because you can read the rest of this in this long newsletter and refer back to it. When you get good at this, you then change from asking to suggesting. You become proactive and say, hey, manager, I noticed we aren't doing this and I thought I could help. Or I noticed this project is unowned or this person needs to be mentored or whatever it is. I was thinking I could do that. How do you feel? And then on the right hand, the most mature is once you and your manager are aligned and they really trust you, you just inform them and say, hey, I saw this wasn't done, so I did it. Any feedback? I saw this needed to be done, so I'm taking care of it. And that's what managers love. When they have someone that they can trust to see what needs to be done and do it, it's magical. So then what happens? When someone else gets fired, leaves, or whatever, they either think, well, I can take a risk on hiring someone new, or I can give it to Ethan, who's already doing everything so well and helping me so much. And that becomes an easy choice because you're the known high performer and hiring someone externally is a risk, or internally, hiring someone external to my team, that's a risk. I'd rather give it to someone I trust. This is the recipe and you can go read it. It's all in this newsletter. So people ask me, we have just 1 or 2 more slides. People often ask me, hey, Ethan, it's hard times. Should I transfer to a safe team to avoid getting laid off? Should I go to something low risk, core to the business, et cetera? Well, first thing I'll say is what is safe? If you look around, plenty of things that might be thought of as safe have turned out to not be safe. So I'm not a huge fan of this, but I do understand that some people will consider, how can I get in the core business that's going to be valued and is definitely going to remain? So like search at Google or, you know, who knows, iPhone at Apple. These are things that are not going away. However, can you even move? Are there spots on that team? Are there good spots? If there are, consider it. It's fine. What about the other direction? What about transferring to a risky new opportunity during these times? Well, I think you should ask, can you afford the risk? And what I mean by that is, hey, there's risk in these teams. They're going to be the future growth opportunities if they succeed. But what if the team gets shut down? What if you get laid off? Can you stand that? Can you tolerate economically and mentally if it goes wrong? If you can, always take more risk. If you're up for it, because taking risk is how we stand out and make gains. But you got to be prepared. You've got to, be ready for the downside. The other thing to be aware of, if you transfer teams, whichever way you transfer, that usually resets trust building. So we talked about how trust is consistency over time. Well, if you change leaders, you're resetting the trust engine. That's fine. Just be aware of that cost, that you're going to have to re-earn that special status to some degree. And so the last bullet here says, get new scope up front. What that means is make sure you go, if you're being promised like, oh, come over to this team and we'll see about giving you an extra team, or come over here and there'll be a bigger opportunity in the future. Well, it's better always to get things settled up front to any degree you can. All right. So these are the specific ways to get trust. Now let's go through a few examples, just examples from my career. And it's 3 different categories. So the first one I call getting a Klingon promotion. When I began my career as a simple engineer, I got started into leadership because the product manager of the team above me was relieved of his duties. He wasn't fired, but they moved him aside and took me, someone who'd been at the company less than a year, equivalent to what you'd call an SDE 1, right? And gave me that leader's responsibilities. And I call it, if you know Star Trek, the Klingons, the way you got command of a ship was you killed the captain. So you took over by getting rid of the person in your way. Now, I didn't do anything to kill this guy or get him removed from his role, but why on earth did they give me the job? I was the person they trusted to do it. And he had lost that trust. Now, the specific reason in this case was I'm a thorny, pushy, loud, driven person, and he was a nice guy. Free tip, when I coach people and they pay me a lot of money, you would think I'd be really kind to them. But I actually often tell them, you know, you're a very nice person, and that's not a compliment. And what I mean by that is not that people should be rude or mean, but that sometimes you have to be forceful and focused to get things done. You have to be driven and you have to be willing to take risk and push others to step up. This gentleman was so nice that he wasn't willing to push a partner who was not delivering. He was willing to chat with them. He was willing to understand them. He was willing to kindly ask them, but he wasn't really willing to say, you know, what you're doing isn't good enough for our company. As a brash 24-year-old or so, I guess I might have just turned 25, I was totally willing to just look people in the face and say, this isn't good enough. This product sucks. I was actually just kind of rude because I wasn't polished. But that was better than what they were getting, which was no pressure. So one real thing that launched me on my career and into first being basically a TPM and then being a manager in my mid-20s. The key point for you to take away is, how can you be the person who's selected when there's a need? How can you be the person that leadership comes to? Because they could have obviously hired externally. They could have said, who can we hire externally? My God, we can't give it to this, crazy kid. Who can we hire externally? But they didn't. They gave it to me, and then I made it happen. Okay, fast forward 20 years. Merch on Demand is a story of starting a new business at Amazon. So this is part of this idea on this slide, start a new project, the middle bullet on the right-hand slide. So Merch on Demand is Amazon's t-shirt printing business. They also do some other things. But at this point, you'd be surprised to know perhaps that Amazon sells like $1 billion a year of custom printed t-shirts. And I helped start that business. Now, we had this idea, but I was running the Amazon App Store. And people said, gee, why is the App Store interested in printing t-shirts? That makes no sense. The key is, I didn't let that slow me down. I said, forget who's doing it for a minute. We should evaluate this on, is it a good idea and a good business, and can we succeed? Not, what do t-shirts have to do with apps? Now, we had some reasons to believe that it was a complementary business. Those reasons, as it turns out, were wrong. But I fought and used some of my headcount to prove out this business. And then it got launched into its own thing and started making money. And now it's The last I knew, and this is old data, so I can talk about it because it's many years old, it was a hundreds of millions dollar business with a double-digit margin. So they were making a lot of money printing t-shirts. The key is you can start ideas even in hard times, particularly if you're a leader, you have people on your team. Simple trick, you go find an eager engineer, someone who wants to step up, or someone else on your team, an eager product manager, and you get them to be enthusiastic about an idea and say, let's do this as a side project, as a skunk works, as a hackathon, and you prove it out, and then you go get it funded. Finally, the bottom story. Jobs nobody else wanted. You know what? If you want to grow, you're probably not going to be offered the juiciest things to go build. When your manager is giving out new opportunities, you have to consider taking them. So I did this many times where I jumped on projects that were offered because they gave me a chance to grow, whether or not they were things I was really excited about. So I worked on things like Amazon's business-to-business product, which at the time meant, how do we ship pallets of paper to schools for their printers? This is not super exciting, at least to me. Some people probably think it's over the moon exciting, but it didn't fit me. I worked on what's called reverse logistics, which is, how do you do returns? How do you do trade-in? We had a group that did video game trade-in. So I was in video games. Video games are cool, but how about trading in used consoles and, you know, having that be a program and trading in used games on DVD? Not my cup of tea, but these were things that were offered to me as, could you lead this? It's a problem for me. I need a leader.